Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, great to see you. Congratulations. What you and President Trump have demonstrated in the past year is clearly peace through strength, and I appreciate the leadership from both of you. We've talked a lot about Venezuelan oil. You know, I focus a lot on energy going to China, and 3/4 of all the oil that went from Venezuela out of the country there last year, 75% of it went to China. They got it at deep discounts. Lots of money back to Venezuela through oil for loan deals. Since the start of this blockade, basically Venezuela crude shipments to China have fallen dramatically. Can you assess or talk a little bit about the impact this has on China's broader energy strategy?
Just to be clear, it's a quarantine, not a blockade. A blockade is an act of war. It's a quarantine, and it's been very effective in the sense that it's given us this leverage. In fact, can I just add something, and this might be to Senator Murphy's question as well. The Venezuelan authorities are now identifying ships that they want us to grab. In fact, about a week and a half ago, we grabbed one of these ships. That was, because here's what happened in the aftermath of the Maduro. About 5 ships took off without authorization from the Venezuelans because they were controlled by some network in the country. With the cooperation of the interim authorities, we seized one of those ships. We brought it back into Venezuelan waters, handed the ship off to the Venezuelans, who in turn fed it into this mechanism, the short-term mechanism that I described to you was created. So we're seeing cooperation on that front. Now, I think your question more specifically was about China. Yeah, so look, China can buy Venezuelan oil, but they're going to have to buy it like everybody else in the world is going to have to buy it. Yeah, at the normal price. And that money is going to flow back to the benefit of the Venezuelan people in a structured way. And I know that in the short term, that will involve this mechanism we've described. In the long term, our intention is that it would be governed by a democratically elected government. You know, I mean, that, like a normal country would handle it. But it's not just about oil. There's other economic activity, the full spectrum. I mean, Venezuela was, and still, we're not talking about some third world country here. I mean, we're talking about a country that doesn't just have wealth, it has memory, it has history of economic activity, of people who own chains of pharmacies. I know some of these people, of people who own chains of retail stores, including American retailers who had a presence there. We just want it to be a normal, prosperous country again, not a playground for Iran, Russia, and China in our own hemisphere. And we're going to try to help them get that because we think it serves our national interest. That will require actions on our part, not money, but ultimately that will require them. This is ultimately going to be on the Venezuelan people and Venezuelan society and Venezuelan leaders to make this happen. We're going to be there to help and assist and create the parameters for it, and we feel like we're making really good progress. If we make as much progress over the next 4 weeks as we've made in the last 3.5 weeks, I'll feel very good about that. If it slows down or it gets complicated, I'll certainly let you know. But our anticipation is that we're going to be able to continue to work cooperatively with them because it's in their interest and ours. But I will point out to this. After this operation happened, look at the people who criticized it. I mean, there were others. China, Russia, Iran, Hamas. These were the people that were upset about this strike and this raid and what we did. And I can tell you that in many countries in the Western Hemisphere, there was great pleasure in the fact that Maduro was removed and that it didn't involve an all-out war and an invasion.
Since you mentioned Iran, and Senator McCormick mentioned Iran as well, a lot of oil is still going from Iran to China. 1 million barrels a day last year. Lots of that money goes back to Iran, to the dictators, the people that are actually killing others on the street. Can you talk a little bit about what we can do to prevent that from continuing to go and what we're doing to support the Iranian?
Some of that is sanctioned oil. This requires the willingness to enforce those sanctions. And obviously that comes with a cost-benefit analysis. The Iranians are also capable of seizing ships and doing that in retribution. But that's certainly something that will be under consideration, and others have done that in the past. And we have seized, for example, weapons shipments in the past that involve Iranian, and in fact, some of the ships, remember, all of these ships that we're seizing with the oil are with court orders. They're either one of two things. We either have a court order from a federal judge that allows us to seize it because it's in violation of a sanction, or it's a flagless vessel in the shadow fleet. And many of these ships here involve Iran. And some of that oil was going to be ultimately transferred to the excess refining capacity that China currently has.
Since you mentioned the word shadow fleet, Senator Shaheen and I have legislation on subsea cables. I've asked you about that the last time we were here. The sabotage being done, directly being targeted. I know that Sweden and Finland have both detained Russian ships along those lines. We're going to have a markup on that bill tomorrow. Is that something you continue to support our efforts to go after?
It is, and it's featured prominently in the agenda, both at the G7 this year, as it did somewhat last year, but again this year in the G7 will be one of the top items we'll be discussing. And we've also been pushing it as a priority for NATO to consider. The two new things we want NATO to make a priority this year in our conversations are the undersea cable infrastructure and Arctic security, and the third is critical minerals and supply chains, because ultimately you can spend all the money in the world on weapons. If you can't make them because you're missing some chip that requires some mineral that China controls, you're in a lot of trouble.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Kane.